You should hear me now.
Yes, welcome. Welcome, thank you for being here.
Okay. So I will talk today, morning everyone. I will talk today about the project we started last year about improving the LibreOffice project sustainability. We estimate to have a LibreOffice, we estimate to have a user base of around 200 million people. This is based on the number of downloads, on the more or less on the share that we estimate to have on the different platforms. We have 90% users on Windows, 8% on macOS, and 2% on Linux. Linux is growing. Actually, during last year, it has almost doubled the number of LibreOffice users. But before changing our numbers, we want to have a stable situation. So we estimate to have around 200 million users. Half of them are only using LibreOffice, half of them are using LibreOffice and another Office suite. And when I mention Office suite, it is either desktop or cloud. So LibreOffice is a cloud version, and it's exactly the same as the desktop version. Is extremely similar. How the market has evolved. Before 95, documents had to be printed to be shared. Then with internet, we started to share the digital documents, and the concept of interoperability was born. Then in around 2005, we had the standards, and therefore interoperability was theoretically improved. The problem is that we have one real standard, which is ODF, and one non-standard, which is Office Open XML, so the Microsoft Office proprietary format. It is approved by ISO, but what has been approved has never been implemented. Although people talk about desktop productivity being dead, the numbers say that this is not true. And again, when I mention desktop, the software can be on the cloud, but desktop means individual productivity. In 2018, when Ubuntu asked their users which desktop application should be there, you see the amount of people, the number of people that wanted to have LibreOffice was amazing. Was even beyond our best guesses. And Google Apps was there since almost forever now. And although Google Apps was there, LibreOffice got around 80% of the choices. Actually, we are talking about a mature product, but a product that is not declining. And one thing that is probably adding interest is the attention for digital sovereignty. It is now clear, not only because we talk about that, but also because the authorities start to understand and to realize that to protect our digital sovereignty, which basically means the ability of managing what we share with our computers and owning what we share with our computers. The format of files is key, and unfortunately they didn't give it enough attention, and this happens in more or less in everywhere in the world. We have small exceptions, the biggest one being the state of Taiwan, but in Europe, the situation is unfortunately quite bad. If we look at the market and the revenues, you see that in 2021 they still have a solid $25 billion, and in 2025 is expected to reach $31 billion. Of course, it is clear that when we speak about billions of dollars, there is a lot of attention there, and the companies that own a fair share of that market do whatever they can to protect it. And when I say whatever they can, I mean they lobby with authorities to protect their market share, and they do whatever tricks they can with the format to avoid interoperability. Interoperability basically doesn't kill the market, kills the market shares. And this is the projected growth you see is around rather stable, around 5% increase year over year until 2025. When we launched LibreOffice, our model was to have a foundation and an ecosystem around the foundation. So the foundation would provide represent the community and provides the governments on the trademarks, but is not releasing a commercial product. So we release only what we call the vanilla version of LibreOffice, which is the reference version. And around that, there are companies in the ecosystem that produce release software which is optimized for enterprises. Our stakeholders are community members and the companies that add value to the project. And we have a lot of users, stakeholders, and either they don't have any involvement because they use a free product, which is absolutely fair, or they have a very low, they give the product a very low value because Office Suite are a commodity. And these has, over the last 10 years, this trend to reduce the value, the perceived value of Office Suite has increased. So today, based on the data that we can extract from our sources, so from Git, we see that 68% of all the code is developed by developers that are paid by a company active in the ecosystem. And volunteers are releasing 28% of code. On the contrary, 90% of donations are from individuals and around 10% from small and medium businesses, but only less than 5% of enterprise users contribute in any way to the project. And they can contribute by sponsoring, they could contribute by sponsoring developers, by, of course, buying a long-term supported version from an ecosystem company. They can sponsor the solution of bugs or the development of new features. This is actually what happens. Most of the companies that are the enterprises that are supporting the project at the moment are either paying developers, so paying companies to have bugs solved, or feature developed. No one, or a tiny fraction is buying an LTS version, and this over the long term would create a problem for the sustainability of LibreOffice. Of course, the sustainability issue is not just a LibreOffice issue. We basically discovered how bad the issue could be in 2014 when the Heartbleed bug was discovered. And after that, there were some research. The most interesting and the most accurate about that was Nadia Ekbal research, sponsored by the Ford Foundation, and the paper is the title of the paper is "Roads and Bridges: The Unseen Labor Behind Our Digital Infrastructure." In 2019, Dries Buytaert, the leader of the the Akuya and owner, and I don't remember the name of the CMS at the moment, sorry, publish a blog post, Balancing Makers and Takers to Scale and Sustain Open Source. Drupal is the Drupal leader. And these are a few excerpts from his blog. And I think that Dries summarizes very well the concept. There are makers and there are takers. And if the takers are too many or become too unbalanced with takers, they can harm open source project, and they can induce the makers to behave in a more selfish manner. What is happening, in fact, is that after this problem, we have seen a number of the relicensing of open source project to avoid the use of these open source projects by large corporation. We at LibreOffice, we don't think that this is a good solution. We want to stay loyal to our copyleft license. We do not want to go open core, which is another solution, which would be to have a version, a stripped down version for the community and a full feature version for the companies. We want to have a single version, and we would like to have the companies, the enterprises, behave in a correct way with us. So going back, when we launched, this was what the summary of our announcement. And the objective was to relaunch the innovation. At the time, OpenOffice was close to dead. It is close to dead today, but Apache Software Foundation doesn't seem to realize this. But the problem is that at that time, the risk of the project being abandoned was very big. So the community, backed by several companies, took control of the product, and we wanted to relaunch the innovation and develop a self-sustaining project. Basically, OpenOffice was not completely self-sustaining because there was a large sun investment behind it. We wanted to change the structure of the project, and basically, we decided to have the balance between community and ecosystem that I was mentioning before. We didn't want to have a single corporate sponsor or to tweak the license to make the project sustainable. So this is what the Document Foundation is doing. The Document Foundation is the foundation behind LibreOffice. And after 10 years, we can say that the Document Foundation has reached the objective, is recognized as a leading FOSS foundation. We have established the LibreOffice brand name, although we still have the OpenOffice issue around because many people are using LibreOffice and calling it OpenOffice just because the resistance to change, even in the name, is incredibly high. But the problem is that looking at these figures, so development in the last 2 years, as I said, enterprise sponsored development was 68%, volunteer is 28%. And of course, volunteers are fundamental, but they are not alone. They are not enough to sustain the project at the pace that the users expect the project to go forward, to make progress. And if we look at contribution, these of course are raw numbers. They should be explained in a larger amount of time. But let's say that in terms of people, there are around 50 core contributors, 110 regular contributors, and a larger number of casual contributors. Of course, if you look at the casual contributors, the community is a lot bigger. For instance, we have 4,000 people active in localization, but you know, keeping track of everything would be really difficult. We are trying to improve. In localization at the time is not fully represented in this chart, but this gives an idea more or less of the numbers. And you see in terms of commits, which is the difference. Of course, this is not to say that core is better than casual contributors, but tells you that we need to have a number of core contributors that are paid to make it absolutely sustainable. So at the moment, basically developed by ecosystem companies are a very large portion of that 78% of core contributions. And without the contribution from the ecosystem, LibreOffice would have issues in keeping up with user expectations. So what we say, we want, we looked at the background. In the first 4 years, there was a growth of the ecosystem companies. We went from 20 to 60 full-time paid developers. Then we started to lose some ecosystem companies. The number of paid developers shrinked. Now is stable, but it should grow back again. We had several development cycles. Now we are at 7. Basically, we think that the product is mature. We don't need to focus the development cycle on a specific area like it was for the first 4 development cycles. We are working at improving interoperability, user interface, solving bugs, developing features, but there is not a single area where we are taking care. The problem is that the ecosystem is not growing as much as the community. The relationship between the ecosystem and community are not ideal because there are some community members that look at ecosystem company in a negative way, and this is not good. With the young contributors coming in, and a large number of community members is not aware of the root of the background of the project, and they provide enthusiastic contribution, but in some cases they create frictions as well. So the issue is that we have to work together to develop the strategy for a next decade that guarantees and bring LibreOffice to everyone. At the moment, LibreOffice is the only viable free open source software alternative to Microsoft Office. We are at the crossroad of the FOSS ecosystem. If you look at this, the project at the time has a large community, there are volunteers, there is an ecosystem, there is a large overlap between volunteers and ecosystem. Many people employed by ecosystem companies are also contributing as volunteers in other areas. For instance, they may be translating the interface in their native language. They can organize events. There is quite a lot of overlapping. And if you look at the different, the entire FOSS world, we are basically more or less in the center, because we have a little bit of a foundation, we have a little bit of traditional software companies, and we have integration support and so on. So LibreOffice we think is a key product for the open source ecosystem. It is a key product for the Linux ecosystem. Our objective is to provide the best free open source Office suite. We want to improve our marketing by underlining the peculiarities of the LibreOffice project. There is a big effort in producing marketing materials. I will cover that after. So the unique selling proposition of LibreOffice is the best open source Office suite ever, backed by a strong community, is providing the standard document format for interoperability, but as also providing a superior compatibility with proprietary document format. And believe me, being compatible with Office Open XML is incredibly difficult, because they are doing as much as they can to make this a mission impossible. We provide the best of open source with professional support for enterprises, and also optimize activities for managing strategic business content for the enterprises that want to use LibreOffice for that. And there are governments using LibreOffice for their objectives. So LibreOffice can be a strategic tool, and is a strategic tool for many. The next 10 years, what are we doing? So we have developed the concept of LibreOffice technology. Basically, LibreOffice has evolved from a single product to a platform for the development of different solutions, which are free open source solutions and are targeted to different public. The fact that we have a single platform for all of this represents an advantage over other software, because they have a different platform for every different public, and even for every different application. We have to reduce the perception that the Document Foundation is a software vendor, because people think that we provide support and other services. We do not. We are not for profit, so we cannot sell, and basically we cannot sell anything apart from some swags or some marketing materials. We have to communicate better and more in a more coordinated way, to make it easier for users to understand which is the best LibreOffice version for their needs. So we have to make enterprises aware that the LibreOffice version released by the Document Foundation might not be the best solution for them. On one case, yes, they would have a completely free product. On the other hand, they would not have a professionally supported product, professionally supported in terms of support availability. Volunteers cannot provide support 24 hours by 7, cannot provide support every day of the year. They have their families. They basically work according to the schedule, while enterprises want a service, a full service support. What about LibreOffice technology? Same processing engine for all modules. The source code has been cleaned and refactored. We have a very high code quality and consistency. We have APIs that make it easier than in the past, of course, to develop product. We have a web page about LibreOffice technology. We have a white paper that explains what it is. Basically, this image summarizes the advantage. As you see, in the case of LibreOffice, we have a common productivity engine. We have the same open document format for every single application. Then we have desktop application, each one with its own user interface. We have mobile platforms. We have tablets with smartphones. And then we have cloud platforms. And the user interface is different, but it's only the user interface is different. If you look at the other software, both proprietary and open core, they have a different engine for each platform. So they have a word processing engine for the desktop, a word processing engine for the mobile, and a word processing engine for the cloud. And then they have a different format for on each platform. Yes, the extension is the same, but again, yes, the format is completely different. And believe me, it can be dramatically different in terms of XML syntax behind it. And this makes, of course, interoperability more challenging, and interoperability for users more challenging, and interoperability for software developers a really difficult mission. So we went from product to platform. Today we have LibreOffice for the desktop, LibreOffice long-term supported optimized for enterprises for the desktop, LibreOffice Online for the cloud, LibreOffice Mobile for Android and iOS, and LibreOffice for Chrome OS. All these products are from different organizations, but share the same engine. So they can have a different name. For instance, on the cloud, you have a Collabora Office Online, but the engine is the same. So consistency of format is absolutely the same. Of course, on Linux phone, I'm trying to look at questions. On Linux phone, you can use LibreOffice for the desktop. It works. We have seen on the Linux phone that have been released LibreOffice working. Of course, the user interface is not optimized. Some tweaks have to be applied, and we expect in this case that the provider of the optimized distribution for Linux desktop is doing this. Anyway, the source code is free, so it's up to people also to provide these tweaks. What we have done to go from product to platform, we work on document interoperability. These are visual example of challenging documents, and one is the original document, and the other one is exported by LibreOffice. Of course, there are still corner cases where the document opens in a completely different way. First thing to do is to look at the fonts. Fonts can be misleading. You can have the visual appearance completely different, but the contents are all there. And of course, fonts are a lock-in component, are a component of the lock-in of Microsoft lock-in strategy. It's not by chance that today that we have that the open source world provides a working solution for to replace Calibri, Cambria in Consolas and so on. Microsoft has announced that they will deprecate those fonts, and they will create brand new fonts for Windows and for Microsoft Office, so that we will have to create new open source fonts that are metrically compatible with the new fonts. And I don't think that this is just by chance. Calibri, in one sense, was a very nice font. We have Carlito that reproduced Calibri, but now Calibri will be deprecated. And I don't think that this is a coincidence. This is done on purpose because the fact that fonts were available for interoperability has reduced the number of issues that users were facing when opening a document created, for instance, with Calibri on Windows. We do round-trip tests for all the documents. There is, if you happen to open a document, a Microsoft Office document that doesn't open perfectly, in most cases, there is a workaround, there is a solution. First, again, look at the fonts, but interoperability should be there. A little bit about open document format. Is independent, interoperable, neutral, perennial, many advantages. Software based on LibreOffice technologies available, as I said, from many different companies. I have added some names here. Look, if you want to get it from the Windows Store, from the Apple Store, look for the company name. You will find a LibreOffice-based solution. If it is, if you have to pay for it, on the Windows Store or on the Apple Store, is not because we want money from you. Is the problem is that maintaining that product on the store has a very high cost, and the company has to cover that cost. So what we decided to do, we added the community label to LibreOffice release by the Document Foundation. It is not, that doesn't mean it is an open core product. That LibreOffice community has exactly the same features of any other LibreOffice software. We do not release software with different features. So what can happen is that there are features that are developed and paid by a company, and there might be a version of LibreOffice released by the company that has developed that features. For instance, Collabora or Allotropia, which are the two biggest one, that for a few months offers that feature just because it has not been merged on the main repository. But this is just a case. It's not for all feature, and can only happen in some cases where the feature was big and was not easy to develop, and it has to be tested. Then we have the LibreOffice Enterprise umbrella name from ecosystem members. At the moment, it is not widely used, but that means that LibreOffice Enterprise is professionally supported. If a company wants 24/7 support, cannot expect this from on LibreOffice community. They have to look at LibreOffice Enterprise. So this clarifies a little bit about the versions and the users. Of course, you can use LibreOffice community on a large migration, but then do not ask to have your bug solved in one day, because this will not happen. LibreOffice community is supported with donations. Unfortunately, there are many free riders with that version. Many universities, many government organizations, many enterprises. That number should be reduced. We know that there will always be some free riders, but we cannot have 95% of free riders and 5% of enterprises that help the project. That's not fair for the 5%, and it's not fair for the project. And LibreOffice Enterprise is a product for purchase. The price is not comparable with the Microsoft Office price. It is a typical open source, commercial open source price. Again, this to make it clear that LibreOffice Enterprise is not a new product. It's just a family name to associate, to make it easier to associate this with the ecosystem companies. How we support LibreOffice Enterprise? We have a web page. We have improved the download page. We have a LinkedIn page, LibreOffice Enterprise. We will relaunch LibreOffice Certification with specific attention for LibreOffice Enterprise. We have registered business-oriented domains. At the moment, they are redirecting, but in the future, there will be specific page there. That's the business web page. That the LibreOffice download, you see, we have a business users click here, and only because we added business users click here, we add up the number of clicks for the LibreOffice Enterprise page was multiplied by 10. So in many cases, it's just a fact of not being informed. This is LinkedIn LibreOffice Enterprise. This is the LibreOffice certification page. If you are supporting LibreOffice, look at the certification. We are we would like to certify you to make it wider. This is what we are doing in terms of summary. We will launch an education campaign specific about sustainability of LibreOffice, of open source project. This will probably start in June with interviews podcast. Thank you for listening, and I will look at the question now to see if there is something that I can answer. Why is not fair for the 5% not to pay for LibreOffice? Because if you are an enterprise and therefore you replace a product like Microsoft Office and you pay hundreds of euros every year for each user, I don't think it's fair for the 5% that pays for the development of enterprise features to not to support at all the free LibreOffice. So you can, if you, for instance, if you don't want to pay for solving bugs or developing features, fair enough. You can buy the long-term supported version from a company, and by paying those few euros per seat per year, you will allow that company to invest the time of their developers in the development of features, in solving bugs. What we say is that we completely understand, and the fact that we are not changing the license is that we do not want to change the license to make it permissive, to make it, we want to stay copyleft. And this, of course, brings with it a number of free riders of the, or if you want, takers of the LibreOffice product. But we don't want to allow companies, for instance, by going with a permissive license, to make it proprietary in the future, because that is exactly what we fighted when we decided to create LibreOffice. And it's not by chance that Apache OpenOffice has a permissive license. This is what IBM wanted, because they wanted to kill LibreOffice, and they thought that a permissive license could kill LibreOffice. So we don't see any other license than a copyleft license. At the moment, we are Mozilla Public License and LGPL. We would like to have more enterprises to support the product. We want to use some moral suasion. We want to use some education. We don't want to use other means that are restrictive, because that would not be free open source software. This would be an excuse to have the free open source software would be an excuse for a commercial strategy, and that is not what we want. We want to stay loyal to our open source principle, to our software freedom principles, and that is what we really look forward. Of course, we know that it's not easy, and we really don't want to change our license. Why we took the decision, this is, sorry, but it's off topic, but I will answer that. Because we think that the way that Free Software Foundation is behaving is not transparent at all in terms of governance. And we expect, and what they've done after all the comments have been raised is not personal to Richard Stallman, is not personal to anyone. The problem is that we think that the Free Software Foundation, if they want to be the steward of free software, they should start to be transparent, to have a democratic election methodology or process. People that have right of vote, either they are everyone or no one, but it should not be just a friend of someone like it is today. And we, for the time being, until we do not see a change, in a real change in the governance at Free Software Foundation, we will not. This is not going to change. We keep it monitored as that. Our board, I'm not a member of the Document Foundation board, but what the board has decided is to reevaluate the position every 6 weeks, which means every month and a half, based on what the Free Software Foundation is doing. And yes, some people have already answered some of the questions. We do not have a contributor license agreement, but again, we do not want to go permissive. It's not because OpenOffice had a contributor license agreement and a copyleft license. We do not want to have a contributor license agreement, and we want to have a copyleft license, full stop. So no permissive and no other licenses. And I think I'm done in terms of timing, and I've also answered some question. I don't know if how the organizers would like to manage this. I'm done for the, and I think in time for my talk.
Yes, thank you very much for your talk. It was very interesting. Also, thanks for replying to all the questions. There are some more questions in the shared note. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so it would be great if you could maybe reply or take a look at some of them. It's like on the left side of your screen. So maybe you can reply to them typing instead of via voice, so we can introduce our next speaker in the meanwhile. So thank you again for your talk. Very, very interesting.